Today on Questions, it's evolution versus creationism, except not really, but kinda, but also not really. Hey everyone, welcome to Questions. I'm Brennan Johnson, and this is a show where you have questions, be it on faith, religion, spirituality, philosophy, depth, meaning, life, or essentially what it means to be human, and we have answers, albeit probably not satisfactory ones. So for today, our question is, if human-like species have been here for almost 1 million years, why did God intervene only 2,000 years ago? So first off, I think I need to say that I'm not sure where the number 2000 is coming from in this question. It's not a big deal, but scripture says that God intervened kind of about 6,000 years ago in terms of God being revealed to Abram. Jesus was born 2,000 years ago, roughly. Jesus was not the first time God intervened. So for the sake of the video, I'm just going to go with the rough number of 6K over 2K, just for the sake of sticking to the generally accepted timelines of the Christian and Jewish scholars. So, if human species have been here for almost 1 million to 2 million years, why did God only intervene 6,000 years ago? If you think of humanity on a timeline, you have roughly 2 million years ago some sort of evidence of a quasi-human-esque beings began to walk the planet. And evolutionists would argue that those would begin to look and act like us somewhere around maybe 100,000 years ago. Even the most conservative Christian creationists would argue that humanity as we know it would have started somewhere between 100,000 and 10,000 years ago. So this means that whether you are an evolutionist or a creationist, everyone kind of agrees that there is this sort of small overlap that Homo sapiens had before God intervened. And I say that only because people much smarter than me can talk about evolution and creationism and the validity of both or against both. But the point I want to make is that no matter where you fall in your beliefs about evolution and creationism, there's really no logical argument that doesn't have this kind of gap between when humans formed and when they started living in a way that we would accept and recognize as humanity, and then when God intervened. So I believe that the argument could be made that no matter what, God waited for humans to develop to a certain extent before intervening. Like in most videos, I do want to say that if the physical word God is a block for you, if it triggers you, if you can't get past that word, substitute it, change it, swap it out. The divine, the universe, the source, the spark, the engine, whatever works for you to denote a being who is above and beyond and within all things. So the question that presents itself is, why did God wait anywhere from 94,000 to 4,000 years of human development before intervening? And to answer that, I kind of want to expand out a little bit. So there's this buddy of mine who is a pastor in Hamilton, Ontario, Kevin Makins, who has this special on YouTube called Holy Shift, which I would highly recommend to anyone watching this. Go watch that too. In his video, though, Kevin talks about how there are some verses in the Bible that are really, really rough for us to read in present society. Explicitly that there are these verses in Leviticus where God explains how soldiers should treat the women they have taken for themselves during war. How after their village is destroyed and after they kill everyone these women know and love, the men should take the woman home, shave their head, bathe her, and then leave her alone for a month, all the while not sleeping with her. Then after a month, you can either marry her or let her go and help her start a new life. And we read that today. We read those verses and we go like, oh, like that is really rough to read. How can an all-loving God say something so cruel, so terrible, and awful? But if we're going to use scripture to inform our lives in any way, we have to try our best to get into the society that those scriptures are being written to and try to chisel out sort of a deeper meaning, not take it on the surface of what it is saying. And people living 6,000 years ago were living in a rough, brutal world. There is historical documentation that shows that women and children living in that world and at that time would take their own lives when an enemy army would invade their town because they knew that death was better than the horrendous things that the army would do to them if they were caught. Like, that was normal. That was the culture. If you didn't invade other nations, those nations would invade you. War was part of just nature. Is it barbaric? Yes. But was it normal back then? Also, yes. So God intervening to the Israelites doesn't say, like, what you're doing is great. It's totally cool. I get it. Keep doing it. Instead, God says, I get that you have to go to war, and that when you go to war, you're going to find a woman and you're going to want to have sex with her because you're a man and you're a terrible person. But I'm going to stop you from being able to do whatever you want. Instead, you will take that woman home and you will have them meet your wife, and you will shave their heads and you will bathe them, which was part of the mourning process in the ancient Near East at that time. And then you will let them mourn for a month, and in that month you will come down from the trauma of adrenaline of going to war. You'll come down from all of that amped up nature, and you'll have time to get back into the pattern of normal life, and you'll have time to process, do I actually even want this woman, or was I just horny and amped up? And then after that month, you still can't sleep with them, but you have to marry them. And the thing to realize back then was that marriage wasn't as kind of lovey-dovey as it is today, which is funny because I'm reading this, I'm doing this on Valentine's Day. Now, back then, marriage was a contract. It was a sale. It was an exchange of property, and you simply hoped that you would fall in love with your spouse over time. So a woman, after the time of mourning for her family lost a war, would most likely understand that she would need to be married as quickly as possible for the sake of being taken care of in a patriarchal society that viewed women as less than human, or at the very most as a second-class citizen to a man. So again, after this month-long process, the man couldn't just sleep with the woman, but he had to marry her, which meant he had to create a contract and a covenant between himself and the woman and God, where he would agree to care for her, to protect her, to provide for her. And if he broke that contract, the man believed that God would punish him for it. So in the context of that day, God was calling men not to just sleep with random women and then cast them away without any sort of consequence, but actually to wait on them and to care for them and then commit to caring for them for the rest of their life. In that context, we can begin to see how revolutionary it would have been at that time. By today's standards, is it barbaric? Is it cruel? Is it absolutely disgustingly horrendous? Yes. But back then, it was revolutionary. And so in these examples, we can see God is taking humanity where they are at and asking them just to live a click above where the rest of the world is at. Take the world that they live in and accept it, but asking for more than just the status quo. If God had gone to the Israelites and been like, don't go to war ever, they either would think that that God was fake, or they would have been conquered and destroyed by a neighboring country. If God didn't call them to be any different than the people around them, then society would never have progressed, or would have a much harder time progressing. Because change happens through friction. Living as is expected of you doesn't produce much growth. You need that challenge, you need that change, you need that push for more. However, we also see that God didn't give that call and then stop there. Years go on, and the call God gives grows and it changes as society changes. God calls for acceptance and love of foreigners and the push for more love, more acceptance, more forgiveness, more grace. It keeps growing. So that by the time we get to Jesus' time, 2,000 years ago, Jesus is challenging society all over again, saying, society is calling us to do this. You are living in this mindset, but I'm asking you for a step above, a step more, taking you to another level. Jesus also says that we are to love our enemies, and any who live by the sword dies by the sword. Essentially, Jesus is saying that the time for war, the time for violence has ended. Before, war was just a simple way of life. You conquer them or they conquer you. Now, Jesus is saying, nope. You are to be all about peace. Jesus also challenges the way men viewed women. Before it was, you see a woman you want to have sex with, kill her husband, let her mourn, and then marry her first, and then cool. Now Jesus is saying, if you even look at a woman lustfully, if you look at a woman like she's an object, like she's less than a human being who deserves anything less than your absolute utmost respect, then you've committed adultery. Then you have sinned. If you look at a woman lustfully, again, in that dehumanizing, objectifying way, without their consent, it would be better for you to pluck your own eye out than to keep doing it. If you want to touch a woman in an objectifying way without their consent, it would be better for you to cut your own hand off than to let it keep happening. Jesus is raising the stakes, challenging the morals of the day, challenging the people who are living by the rules of the day. So, after all of that, why did God wait 94,000 to 4,000 years? I would argue that it was the period of time when humanity was finally going to be able to, quote, handle it. You know, like, this isn't a perfect analogy, but we wait for the right moment to do everything with people. Like, we don't give babies steak, we give them milk. There's a progression of what we entrust people with, and it gets more and more and more as they get older and older and more capable to handle more things. So now you can argue that 100,000 years ago, humans had evolved from animals to have a sufficient sense of self-awareness or spiritual sensitivity that we passed from being animals to being people. Or you can be on the other side and you can argue that we had something grown as a society of humans to being ready to have God intervene with us. Again, you can look at human development either through the lens of creationism or evolution or a mixture of both. Either way is up to you and what you want to do and your specific beliefs, but no matter where you fall on the spectrum of evolution to creationism, this idea fits. And it also makes sense when you dive into scripture and look at it with a more historical lens. But the deeper message of all of this is that I believe that God is always seeking to be in this world, not out of it, not high in the sky, not far away from us, but right here. God knows us, knows society, knows what this world is intimately familiar with it, and doesn't ask us to go along with it perfectly or ask us to fight against it so much that we would be absolutely crushed pushing against it, but gives us a challenge to not be a part of the status quo, not just accept everything as the way it has to be. All of this is to say that God has continually been calling us forward one click at a time, continually asking us to be just a click set apart from where society is. That is what it means to be holy. Holy means to be set apart. We've just forgotten what it means, or we must understand what to be set apart means. Looking at those around you and judging them for their faults is not holy. Being holier than thou is ironically not holy. The things in this world that are holy are things when everyone and everything is saying, like, this is just the way it is. We can be emboldened to say, no, not anymore. I won't take part in that. There are people who are fighting against institutional racism, fighting against sexism or corporate greed, fighting for the environment or against billionaires who are ruining the lives of the working class. There are people who are looking at the way the world has worked for 100,000 years or 10,000 years or 2,000 years or 100 years or even the last 10 years and are saying, I won't participate in this anymore. I'm living my life just one click ahead, one click forward. I believe those people that are doing the holy work, they have set themselves apart. They have seen the terrors of this world and they are saying no more. They are living holy lives. I believe God, the universe, the spark, the engine, the divine, the thing behind all things is always calling us to something beyond the step of where society is. The call never ends. The desire for growth, for a better world, for better society, for us to be more intentional and more compassionate has never ended. It started thousands and thousands of years ago, and it will keep progressing until the end of human civilization. But a God that sees the world for what it is and sees me for who I am and simply invites me to try my best to be a better person than I was yesterday, to me, that is someone I want to know. So that is what I got for you all today. If you liked what you heard or something that was said that was engaging to you or made you want to seek to know more than this format of me talking to a camera for the few minutes, what this allows for us to do, then you can follow us on YouTube at Brennan Johnson or at Instagram at The Commutual. The Commutual is a group of people who are spiritually minded or spiritually curious who don't want to be bogged down by the institution of religion. You can also DM us or comment on the video. As well, if you have questions that you would like us to cover on these question videos, we can always put it on the list. You can always be asking us. Thank you, everyone. Grace and peace. Cheers.